Hey friends and book lovers, welcome! Today I am really excited for this video. I have just finished, as of last night I think it was, the Poison Song, which is the final in the Winnowing Flame trilogy, and oh my god, chef's kiss, it was so good. And by now you can probably guess this is going to be a gush review. It's going to be an honest review despite that, but I did really enjoy this series, so there's definitely going to be a lot of positives. But I'm also going to lay out some of the things that I think people might not like and some of the things to be aware of if you are thinking of delving into this series and you might be a more picky fantasy reader than I am. This first part, the review, is going to be spoiler free. I'm going to get into then some tropes that this has, and then I'm going to get into some of my spoilery thoughts. Not very many, because I am going to do a discussion video with two amazing booktubers this weekend and record that and hopefully put that out in the next coming week and a half or so. But I do want to just put out like my preliminary thoughts before I even get into it with them, and that will be at the end of this video, and I will mark that in the box below and you'll be able to tell when the spoilers are happening. I did do a review for the first book in this trilogy, The Ninth Reign, and in that review I do go over what that book was about, so it kind of gives you a good introduction on what is the first book about, kind of, so you get a feel for what you're going to get yourself into. The other two books open up the world and the story in a big way, so that is a good introduction into what you're going to get yourself into, and the fact that it's going to grow more is very true. And I'll tell you right now, the story and the world and everything is going to grow much more in the next books. But that video, and I'll link it up above and down below, will definitely give you a good little intro on like what this is about, because the synopsis for The Ninth Reign doesn't make a lot of sense unless you've read the book. Once I read the book and got into it, then I kind of understood what was going on, but until you read the book and understand the world and what goes on and the situations, and it's kind of hard to digest what it's about, and it kind of goes into that. And I also go into The Ninth Reign and if I liked it or not, because obviously the first book makes a huge difference on if you're gonna like the series, so definitely check that one out. I also did a book chat for the second book, The Bitter Twins. That one was great too. I gave that one like a 4.5 out of stars because it was a little slow. And then this one, The Poison Song, is my absolute favorite out of the trilogy, and it's a 5-star through and through. One of the best conclusive novels in a trilogy that I've ever read, and I don't know if I can call Jen Williams a favorite author at this point since I've only read one of her trilogies, but I would love to read her Copper Cat trilogy just to kind of get a better rounded understanding of her work. So I know that one is not as well acclaimed as the Winnowing Flame trilogy, but I still want to get to it. I still think it'll be really interesting to read her more past works that I think are even lesser known than this one, and Winnowing Flame is definitely gaining popularity. I myself heard about it from Patrick Leo over on Goodreads, and then I saw Elle Brooks do a video on it on her booktube channel, and then I was like, okay, I have to read it. It's just been a great ride, and I binge read the last 50% of this novel, so it goes to show you that it's simply amazing and you should read it, and here are all the reasons why. So in my reviews I rate them in 5 different ways, or 5 different areas. The first is writing style, the second is world building, then comes plot, then comes characters, and lastly I rated it on enjoyment, which is definitely biased. A lot of reviews of mine are going to be biased because they're my points of view, but enjoyability is definitely a big one, so I'll go through that. The first is writing style, and of course I talked about this a lot in The Ninth Reign. I love her writing style. I found it really accessible, really easy to understand. It doesn't go too deep into the prose. It's not too flowery of a writing style, but it still gives you enough to keep it atmospheric. So it's very atmospheric. It's creepy when it needs to be creepy. It's emotional when it needs to be emotional. It's infuriating when it needs to be infuriating, and it's just perfect in that way. So we do get a very kind of more straightforward writing style. It's not as straightforward as some other authors, but it's not flowery either. So it's really easy to read, really accessible, and I felt like it flowed really well, and I was just hooked from the beginning. I knew that I was going to enjoy the book, at least enjoy it, because of the writing style and how good that was. And again, like I said, because of all that, I definitely want to be reading her other trilogy to see if that's a similar writing style and if I'll enjoy that one as well. The next 2 points are world building and plot. Now, world building and plot, and then world building, plot, and characters are all really well interwoven in this novel. They all kind of go hand in hand, which isn't the case for other novels. A lot of other series might not interweave these so well, but this series really weaves them so well. So in the second book, the world and the history opens up a lot more, and the characters actually end up just learning and going and seeing a lot more and discovering a lot more about the world and about the history, and that's really all I can say without giving too much away. And we even have world building in the third book. So the world building doesn't just stop in the first one, it doesn't just stop in the second one, because sequels are often where we see a lot more world building, but even in the third and final book, you still have that world building. You still have that build up of lore, which I didn't even realize that it was missing, but when I was reading it, I was like, yes, this is like the piece of lore that I never knew I needed. And it was so well done and so interesting and interwove with the previous parts of the series so well that it was something that you could easily miss, but at the same time, when it was handed to me, I was like, oh gosh, this makes so much sense. And the world building, again, is so enveloped in the plot. I mean, them discovering their world and their lore and these situations that are very long ago past and situations that are kind of stuck in time, they have to go and understand their world in a big way in order to kind of solve these problems or progress within the problems and within the world. And we definitely get a lot of that in the second and the third book. The world building and the discovery of the world and the history interweaves really well with the points of the plot and the plot lines. It also interweaves really well with the character arcs, because as they learn about their world, this definitely helps them grow and progress as a character and as becoming who they are. And like I said, it's really hard to separate these three elements from each other in the context of the series, but hopefully you'll understand and get a little bit of a point of view or glimpse as to what this series is like in terms of those 3 points. The next one is the plot, and honestly the plot was great. And again, like I said, it definitely depended on the world building, so you had to learn about the world and the lore in order to move forward. And the plot also lended itself to a lot of character development. So we got a really good bits of both really plot driven, action packed, and then parts where it was a little slower, if you will, but we had some really great character development that helped progress the plot. You would need that character development in order to move the plot forward, and a lot of that character development came from learning about the history and interacting with the other characters. The other thing I really liked is that you learn about the history and the lore through the eyes of the character, and so that's how it kind of comes full circle with the plot, the world building, and the character building, is that you learn all these things through the characters grow through these experiences, which moves the plot forward, which then like helps you see more of the world. And it's just a beautiful interwoven nuanced cycle between those 3 areas of the novel and the book writing. I have to say, even as someone who is pretty much a character driven reader, I loved the parts where we're learning about the characters. I loved the parts that were not as action packed but still really complex and very invested in the characters and just them interacting with each other. It still feels like you're getting so much really delicious information and really strong points that it doesn't feel, at least for me, it never felt like I was too bored. And I really enjoyed like pretty much every page, even on parts where I did find it to be a little slower and it could have picked up the pace, which is more notably in the first half of book 2. I still enjoyed every page I read, even with that in mind. So that tells you a lot about the pacing. I think the pacing was great. I think you got as much information as you needed for the story, and these books are not short, so you definitely get a ton of information in order to progress everything further. And it's complex, but it's easily digestible and it makes a lot of sense within the story. So it never feels like information overload, and it never feels like too little information either. I have to say, I also really love the way this ended. You got a really satisfying ending with a little bit of hope sprinkled in there. Obviously, it's not like this happy ever after ending. You definitely, I definitely got my heart broken in parts of these books. It was investment in the characters and things not always going the right way, and heart beating, sweating, tearing up types of scenes. But that's, I think, the mark of a really good book, when it can really give you and make you give that emotional reaction. So honestly, chef's kiss. Those 3 points, world building, plot, and character, are so interwoven, like I said, that it's hard to split them up. So together, they're so beautiful, and I hope that more authors are going to kind of start doing that in their books. A lot of the times I see things like this separated, which can be really easy to review and easy to digest, but when it's interwoven, it just feels like a really seamless story, and that's exactly what this series was. It was incredibly seamless and 100% underrated. Obviously, enjoyment is the last thing I'll touch upon, but I enjoyed the crap out of the series. It was so good. I think in the 9th Reign review, I said that I was hooked from like the 16th or 10th page or something like that, which is like not even to page 50, not even 20 pages, and I was already hooked into the first book. So that tells you how enjoyable and how addictive it is. And then for Poison Song, I binge read the ending of Poison Song and definitely binge read the ending of 9th Reign. I think I also ended up binge reading parts of Bitter Twins, but I can't recall as easily. But I know the 1st and 3rd, I was just dying to know more, and I read those so quickly. It was so good. No, you know what? Actually, Bitter Twins, I also read that really quickly because I read the majority in like 2 or 3 days, and I ended up reading like the trickling last few hundred pages in the beginning of the next following month. So I also binge read a lot of that novel too. I was definitely interested in certain storylines over others. I would say in the most recent book I read, I was interested in all of them except for maybe one, but the only reason I wasn't interested in that one character was because I really didn't like that character, so it goes to show you that that was also well done. I hated that character, I didn't like them at all, didn't want to read about them because I was like, you know what, good riddance, I just don't even want to know about you, I don't care, but I was supposed to feel that way about that character, so it makes sense. And it was just, it was so good. You just, every page you turn, you're so interested. By the time you're done with that chapter, you just want to know more about that POV, and then you're on to the next one. And there aren't a ton of POVs. I would say maybe like 3 or 4. So it's not a lot to keep track of like other books. So there's not a lot of confusion with these, I feel like, especially because most fantasy novels do have multiple POVs, and this one had that, but it wasn't too much. I will say, if you liked the Broken Earth trilogy, you will probably like the Winnowing Flame series. This series has this mysterious air about it when you first start reading the first 200 pages. You're not really sure what's happening. You're kind of just plopped down into the storyline, and you're not really sure why things are the way they are or why things are so dire, but you learn over the next couple hundred pages what is happening and why the world is the way it is. Which reminds me of the Broken Earth trilogy, because you didn't know exactly why everything was the way it was until, you know, the last few hundred pages, and it's kind of the same with this. You don't know exactly why things are the way they are or how things happen or where things are until you finish this novel. There's a lot of stuff happening, and it's a mystery to the characters and to us as well, and that was just so interesting. It also reminds me of From Blood and Ash. The first 175 pages were very mysterious, very like shrouded in mystery, like shrouded in this fog, and you didn't really know what was happening until things started to get explained to you later on in the book. And that's how I felt like all of these books were. Each book gave us a tidbit of what was happening in the world, and it was not easy to figure out on your own. I was never able to get a prediction from this novel easily. Maybe some of the romantic predictions, but not a plot prediction, because it was just so tough. It's obvious now that I've read it, but it's really tough before you get a chance to get through it. So overall, this series is 5 out of 5 stars for me. It's definitely a new favorite fantasy series, 100% underrated. I can't wait to read more of Jen Williams' works. I'm definitely going to be ordering her Copper Cat trilogy, and I definitely recommend this to anyone who's interested in the books that I mentioned or who's read the other series that I've mentioned and would think that this would be up their alley. This series has a lot of sci-fi elements, a lot of horror elements, and overall, it's just really, really amazing. The tropes that I will mention are just a few. We have the found family trope, and it's done so well. We have the animal companions trope, and that's also done so well. We have the enemies to lovers and then lovers to enemies, which are 2 separate couples, but again, chef's kiss. It's done so beautifully, and it's done so incredibly well. And we also have kind of like the unknown, mysterious world in here too. So those are the tropes. Now this part is the spoilery thoughts. If you haven't read it, I suggest you click away so that you read it and then come back and then discuss in the comments if you agree or disagree with me, or you can find me on Discord and we could talk on there for these spoilery thoughts. Honestly, Noon's character arc just absolutely murdered me. I was so sad to see her die, but it made sense in the context of what she was doing that she had to die, and it just killed me. It broke my heart for Tor because I loved them together and they finally admitted that they loved each other, but also it was so beautiful to see Noon's arc coming from this straggly little freed witch to becoming the hero and saving everyone and being this amazing, powerful, bottomless, powerful force and just being awesome. My camera battery died. Back to our regularly scheduled program. I only have a couple more thoughts to share and then we will wrap up the video. So for my spoilery thoughts for the rest of them, I also really didn't like that Hestilian lived but Noon died. I understand the sacrifice that Noon made, like I said, and I understand why that sacrifice made sense within the context of the story, because she had to give up something big in order to be able to kill all of the worm people and save everyone. But it just sucks that after Hestilian put everyone through such friggin' hell, she survived somehow, and she even got sap from the Tree Father, and so did Tor, and Tor has to live without Noon now. Oh, that just breaks my heart. Every time I think about it, it breaks my heart. Hestilian gets to live, and first I was really like annoyed about that. I was like, God dang it, I think Hestilian should just die. There's no point of having her live, like she served her purpose. But then I was thinking, it's probably a bigger punishment for Hestilian to live with her sins. And even in the last chapter where Vintage is writing to her nephew, she mentions that Hestilian looks like she's seen horrors, that she looks guilty, she just looks like hell, basically. And I'm just thinking that's probably fair in the sense that she gets to live and she has to live with all the awful things that she did to the people that she loved for nothing. For nothing. She wasn't even on the right side. She just was on the wrong side, and she has to live with that. And that's an even bigger punishment than dying. So at first I was a little bit annoyed, but now I'm kind of understanding it. I'm not sure if that's the way Jen Williams wanted it. I appreciated that thought that I had, and I will forever wonder if that's why Hestilian lived, or she just did it to like prick us in the side. I was also kind of wondering about Cellophon and why he died, but then it does make sense that he grew up more in the corpse moon and had the growth fluid and spent most of his life growing up within the worm behemoth and the corpse moon, and not really any time in Ebora. When he saw Ebora was basically when the last battle happened. So that also did make a lot of sense. Hestilian, though, was not the character that I hated the most. Nanthema was the character that I hated the most. I was so infuriated with her in book 2, and then even more infuriated with her in book 3 after I saw who she had loyalties with, and for what? For what purpose? She's just so selfish and like narcissistic, and I just hated her character, and I just wanted more for Vintage. And on that note, I was really happy that Vintage found like a really good person, and it was really cool in the 3rd book to read the epigraphs from Chenlo instead of the epigraphs for Vintage, and I would love to know like the exact significance of that, but it's cool that they kind of ended up semi together, and I just thought that was really cute. Those are my spoilery thoughts. Definitely talk to me if you read this series. I would love to hear what you thought of it. I adored it. I wouldn't mind, you know, another novel or novella in this world, because I'm gonna miss these characters so much, and they definitely made an impact on me. They left their little footprints in my heart. I was so incredibly invested in all of these characters. So if you like this video, please go ahead and click that like button. And if you want to see more content from me, if you enjoy this content, then please don't hesitate to subscribe.